Hey everyone, um, let's get started. So let's see, plan for today is we'll go over the rest of ICA, independent components analysis, and in particular, talk a bit about CDF's cumulative distribution functions, and then actually, let's do that later. All right. So plan is we'll go over the rest of ICA, independent components analysis, and we'll talk a bit about CDF's cumulative distribution functions, and then derive the ICA model. And in the second half of today, we'll start on the final of the interesting 4 major topics of the class, which is reinforcement learning. We'll talk about MDPs or Markov decision processes. Okay? So to recap briefly, we had, remember the overlapping voices demo. So we said that in the ICA problem, independent components analysis problem, we assume we have sources S, which are Rn, if you have n speakers. So for example, if this is speaker 1's audio, then at time t, S, superscript parentheses t subscript 1 is the sound emitted by speaker 1 at time t. Sorry, that's interesting. All right, let's try to make that go with a little bit. We're using sometimes I to index training examples, and so the training examples sweep over time. And sometimes, usually I'll use I, sometimes I use T, I guess, in the case where the different examples come from different points in time in your recording. And what your microphones record is xi equals A of Si. So just for now, let's say you have 2 speakers and 2 microphones, in which case A would be a 2x2 matrix. In the homework problem, you have 5 speakers and 5 microphones, in which case A will be a 5x5 matrix. We'll talk later about what happens if the number of speakers and microphones is not the same. And the goal is to find a matrix W, which should hopefully be A inverse. So that Si is W times X, recover the original sources. And we're going to use these W1 up through Wn to represent the rows of this matrix W. Yeah. Oh, yes, you're right. Thank you. Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, so last time we had all right. So remember, this is a picture of the cocktail party problem. And last time I showed these pictures about, why is ICA even possible, right? Given 2 overlapping voices, how is it even possible to separate them out? How is there enough information to know, what are the 2 overlapping voices? And so one picture we saw was this one, where if S1 and S2 are uniform between -1 and +1, then the distribution of data will look like this. If you pass this data through the mixing matrix A, then your observations, now the axes have changed, x1 and x2, may look like this. And your job is to find an unmixing matrix W that maps this data back to the square. Okay? Now, this example is possible because the sources S1 and S2 were distributed uniformly between -1 and +1. It turns out human voices, the recordings per moment in time are not distributed uniform between -1 and +1. And it turns out that if the data was Gaussian, then ICA is actually not possible. Here's what I mean. Let's say that so the uniform distribution is a highly non-Gaussian distribution, right? Uniform between -1 and +1. This is not Gaussian, and that makes ICA possible. What if S1 and S2 came from Gaussian densities, right? If that were the case, then this distribution, S1 and S2, would be rotationally symmetric. And so there'd be a rotational ambiguity, right? Any axis could be S1 and S2. You can't map, this type of parallelogram back to this square, right? So you can't, if I think in this parallelogram, you can sort of read off, that maybe one axis should look like that. Sorry, I'm drawing with a mouse, not drawing very well. Second axis should maybe look like that, right? And by inverting that, you can get the data back to the square. But in the case of if the data look like this, then you actually don't know, because maybe this should be S1 and that should be S2, right? But so there's this rotational ambiguity because the Gaussian distribution is rotationally symmetric. If S1 and S2 are standard Gaussians, then this distribution is rotationally symmetric, and you don't have enough information to recover the directions that correspond to the original sources, okay? So it turns out that there is some ambiguity in the output of ICA. In particular, last time we talked about two sources of ambiguity. You don't know which is speaker 1 and which is speaker 2, right? You don't know which one to number speaker 1 and which one to number speaker 2. And you might take this data and flip it horizontally, reflect this, on the S1 goes to negative S1, or reflect this on the vertical axis. We don't know if it's positive S2 or negative S2. And in the case of this example, where S1 and S2 are uniform -1, +1, those are the only sources of ambiguity. But if the data was Gaussian, there'd be additional rotational ambiguity, which actually makes it impossible to separate out the sources. Okay, so it turns out that. All right, cool. So it turns out that the Gaussian density is the only distribution that is rotationally symmetric. If S1 and S2 are independent and if the distribution is rotationally symmetric, meaning that the distribution has sort of circular contours, then it must be a Gaussian density. And so there is a theorem, which I'll just state informally, that ICA is possible only if your data is non-Gaussian, right? But so long as your data is non-Gaussian, then it is possible to recover the independent sources, okay? I'm just stating that informally. So let's see. So what I'd like to do is develop the ICA algorithm assuming that the data is non-Gaussian, okay? Now, in order to develop the ICA model, we need to figure out what is the density of S, right? And I'm going to use P subscript S, of the random variable S to represent the density of S. An equivalent way to represent the probability of the density of continuous random variables is via a CDF, which stands for cumulative distribution functions. And the cumulative distribution function of a random variable f of s in probability is defined as the chance that the random variable is less than that value. So I guess notation has been inconsistent, sorry, but this is capital S I'm using to denote the random variable, and this is some constant, right? And is that same constant is that lowercase s, okay? And so, for example, if this is the PDF of a random variable s, maybe of a Gaussian, right? The CDF is a function that increases from 0 to 1, where the height of a CDF at a certain point is the probability. So if you take the same point, right? So the height of a CDF at a certain point, lowercase s, is the probability that the random variable takes on a value equal to this value or lower, which means that the height of this function is equal to the probability mass, the area under the curve of your PDF over to the left of that point. Okay, so that's I don't know. Sometimes some probability and statistics courses teach this concept, and some don't, I guess. But there's a mapping between the PDFs and CDFs of a function, of a continuous random variable. And the relation between the PDF and the CDF is that the density is equal to the first derivative, right, f prime. So if you take the derivative of the CDF, then you should recover the PDF, okay? But so I think in order to specify, some random variable, we could either specify the PDF, right, the probability density function, or you could specify the CDF, which is just, let's tell me what's the chance of the random variable taking on any value less than any particular value s. And by taking the derivative of this, you can always recover the PDF. And by integrating this, you can always go to the CDF, okay? And so what we're going to do in ICA is instead of specifying a PDF for how speakers' voices sound, we're instead going to specify a CDF. And we'll have to choose a CDF that is not the Gaussian density CDF, because we have to assume that the data is non-Gaussian. And the CDF, is a function that always goes from, right, 0 to 1, okay? So, all right. So we'll specify so in a little bit, we'll specify some CDF for the density of the sources, of what human voices sound like, let's say. And if you differentiate this, you will get the PDF or the density of S, right? Which is equal to that. Now, we're going to derive a maximum likelihood estimation algorithm in a minute, but our model is that x is equal to AS, which is equal to, I guess, W inverse of S, and S is equal to WX, right? So that's the model. And in order to derive a maximum likelihood estimate for the parameters, when you have, so this is going to be the density of x. Right. So this is a relationship between x and s. X is equal to AS equals W inverse S, and S equal to WX, right? So this is the model. And what I'd like to do is, let's say you know what's the density of S. What is the density of x if x is computed as the matrix A times S, right? So one step that's tempting to take is to just say, well, S is equal to W times X, so the probability of X is just equal to the probability of S taking on the certain value, right? So I mean, this is S, right? And so the probability of seeing a certain value of x is equal to the probability of s taking on that corresponding value. Because assuming W is an invertible matrix, there's a bijection, there's a one-to-one mapping between x and s. So to find the probability of x, just find the probability of s and compute the corresponding probability. It turns out this is incorrect. And this works for probability mass functions, for discrete probability distributions that take on discrete values. But this is actually incorrect for continuous probability densities. So let me show an illustration, and we'll go back to derive what is a correct way of computing the density of x. Oh, and we'll want a density of x because when you get the training set, you only get to observe x. And so for finding a maximum likelihood estimate parameters, you need to know what's the density of x. You can choose the parameters. Choose the parameters W to maximize the likelihood. Right? So that's what we want to compute, the density of x. But let's use a simple example. Let's say the density of S is indicator S is between 0 and 1. Okay? So this is S is distributed uniform from 0 to 1. And let's say X is equal to 2 times S. Okay? So in our notation, A is equal to 2, W is equal to 1/2. This is a n equals 1, one-dimensional example. So this is the density of S, right? Uniform distribution from 0 to 1. And if x is equal to 2 times S, then this seems like x should be equal, x is distributed uniformly from 0 to 2, right? Because if S is uniform from 0 to 1, you multiply by 2, x is distributed uniformly from 0 to 2. And so the density for x is equal to this, 1, 2. Right? And it's now half as tall because probability density functions need to integrate to 1. Right? So this is a uniform from 0 to 2 probability density function. And so the correct formula is P of x equals 1/2 times indicator 0 less than equal to x less than equal to 2. Right? Okay. And more generally, the correct formula for this is actually this times, this is the determinant of the matrix W. And in the case of a real number, the determinant of a real number is just its absolute value, which is why we have the density of x equals 1/2, that's the absolute value of the determinant of W times indicator whether 2 times S is within 0 to 1. Okay? Yeah, right. So I guess this is indicator 0 less than equal to 1/2 x less than equal to 1, right? Since that's S. Okay? So this is an illustration showing why this is the right way with the determinant of W multiplied in here as a way to compute the density of x. And I don't know, for those of you familiar with determinants, and determinants is a function you can call in NumPy to compute. But also the intuition of determinism measures how much it stretches out a local warping, and so you need to sort of divide by the determinant of A or multiply by the determinant of W in order to make sure your distribution still normalizes to 1, right? So that's where that comes from. Okay. So we're nearly done. Just one more decision, and then we can derive a maximum likelihood estimation, derive a maximum likelihood estimate of the parameters. The last thing we need to do is choose the density of what speakers' voices sound like. And as I said just now, what we are going to do is choose a non-Gaussian distribution, right? And so, well, f of s is equal to the chance of this person's voice, right? Random variable s being less than a certain value. And we need a smooth function that goes between 0 and 1. Right? We need a smooth function that has vaguely that shape. And so, well, what functions we know that are vaguely that shape? Right? Let's pick the sigmoid function. And it turns out this will work okay. There are many choices that will actually work fine. It turns out that if you choose the sigmoid function to be the CDF, then if you look at the PDF this induces, if you take the derivative of this, right? So take P of x equals the derivative of the CDF. It turns out that if this is the Gaussian, then the PDF that this choice induces is something with fatter tails, right? By which I mean that it goes to 0, So Gaussian density goes to 0 very quickly. right, is like e to the negative x squared, right? The Gaussian is a square in the exponent of the density. And it turns out that this particular density, taken by compute derivative of sigmoid, it goes to 0 more slowly. And this captures human voice and many natural phenomena better than the Gaussian density because there are a larger number of extreme outliers that are more than 1 or 2 standard deviations away. But there are actually multiple distributions that work. If you use a double exponential distribution, so this is an exponential distribution, exponential density. If you take a symmetric or two-sided exponential density for P of S, it will also work quite well for ICA. But I think early history of ICA, researchers, I think it was, might have been Terry Sanowski down at the Salk Institute, just needed a function with these properties, and he picked the sigmoid and plugged it in, and it works just fine. And it's been a good enough default that is still widely used, right? But if you use this double-sided exponential, sometimes also called the Laplacian distribution, this works fine as well as a choice of P of S. Okay. So, final step. The density of S is equal to the product of the let's see. So product from I equals 1 through your n sources of the probability of each of the speakers emitting that sound, right? Because the n speakers are speaking independently, right? Yeah. Wait, sorry, say that again?
Sorry, on the top right whiteboard, why is it the case that the probability density function of x is equal to the derivative of the cumulative density function of x?
Oh, yes, you're right. Sorry about that. Yes, this should have been. Sorry, yes, this should have been P of S. Yeah, thank you. Right. Go from a CDF to a PDF by taking derivatives. Yeah, thank you. All right, cool. So S is the vector of all 2 speakers or all 5 speakers' voices at one moment in time. So the density of S, right? S is an Rn, is the product of the individual speakers' probabilities. And this is the key assumption of ICA, that your 2 speakers or your 5 speakers are having independent conversations, and so at every moment in time, they choose independently of each other what sound to emit. Right? And so, using the formulas we worked on just now, the density of X is equal to, is really the density of Wx times the determinant of W. Right? And this is equal to in this notation, Wi transpose X, this is, right, because Wi is the ith row of the matrix W. And so, I guess Sj is equal to Wj transpose X, right? Take a corresponding row and multiply it by X to get a corresponding source. Actually, sorry, I think that's right, yeah. Let me use J there to make this clearer. Okay. And so this writes out, so this shows what is the density of X expressed as a function of P of S, which we've assumed, which is fixed as a CDF of the sigmoid, as a derivative of the sigmoid, and as a function of the parameter W, right? So this is a model that, given a setting of the parameter W, which is a square matrix, allows us to write down what's the density of X. So the final step is we could use maximum likelihood estimation to estimate the parameters W. So the log likelihood of W is equal to sum over the training examples of log of, you know, times the determinant of W, right? And you can use stochastic gradient ascent. Right? Take the derivative of W with respect to the log likelihood. And it turns out, this is derived in the lecture notes. I'll just write it out here. Times xi. I hope I got that right. Yeah, okay, right. Yeah. And it turns out that if you use this formula, don't worry about the formula for the derivative. The full derivation is given in lecture notes. But it turns out that if you use the derivative of the log likelihood with respect to parameter matrix W and use stochastic gradient ascent to maximize the log likelihood, run this for a while, then you can get ICA to find a pretty good matrix W for unmixing the sources. Okay? So just to recap the whole algorithm, right? You would have a training set of x1 up through xm, where each of your training examples is the microphone recordings at one moment in time. And so the time goes from 1 through m. What you do is initialize the matrix W, say randomly, and use gradient ascent with this formula for the derivative in order to maximize the log likelihood of the data. And after gradient ascent converges, you then have a matrix W, and you can then recover the sources as S equals W of X. And then now that you have the sources, you can take, say, S11 through S1M and play that through your laptop speaker in order to see what source 1 sounds like. Right? And so that's how you would take overlapping voices and try to unmix them. Okay? Oh, yeah?
What are choice of sigmoid is still not rotation symmetric?
Oh, why is choice of sigmoid not rotation symmetric? Boy, I don't know how to visualize that. Try plotting it in NumPy, matplotlib, I guess. If you plot the contours of the so it turns out that if this is S1 and S2, what you do not want is a density whose contours look like that. Haven't done this for a while. I believe if you take this distribution, the contours will look like that. It's been a while since I looked at this, but I think it'll look like that. So this is not rotationally symmetric. Do you remember, Anand? Oh, this is Laplace. Yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, yes, Laplace definitely looks like that. I think sigmoid looks a bit like that, too. Yeah, a little like that. You plot it and see if I'm right. Or post on Piazza if one of you plots it, you can see it. I haven't done that for a long time. Yeah, at the back.
Two questions. First, we have the determinant behind you of W and the likelihood on the left. Yet when we take the log, we do not include the determinant except log function. Why is that?
Oh, why don't you interpret the determinant log? Actually, yes, the log should be like this, I think. Yes.
Another question is, what's G? Function G?
Oh, sorry, G is a sigmoid function. Yes, so G is Z. question?
For viewing purposes, what's the closest, like, non-linear, say, extension of this? Because I assume people have taken this method and thought about it in some kind of beneficial way.
Sure. What's the closest nonlinear extension of this? We don't have a great answer to that right now, frankly. So a bunch of people, including my former students and me, have done research to try to extend this to nonlinear versions, and there's some stuff that kind of works, but I don't think there's like a tried and true algorithm that I'm ready to say this is the right way to do it. Yeah, actually, maybe, yeah. Actually, I can say a little bit more about that if people are interested. Well, yeah. Actually, yeah, let me try to. All right, let's see. So for several years ago, and still kind of ongoing, there's been research, some done by my collaborators and me, some done by others on trying to build nonlinear versions of ICA. And so some of you might have seen this slightly infamous Google CAT result, right? So this one was leading the Google Brain project, one of the first projects we did, just a few years ago now, where we trained a neural network on, many hours of YouTube videos, and eventually it learned to detect cats, because apparently there are a lot of cats in YouTube videos. And so it turns out that the algorithm we used was sparse coding, which is actually very closely related to ICA. And so this rough algorithm was attempting to build a nonlinear version of ICA where you train one version, train one layer of sparse coding, let's say, to extract low-level features, and then recursively apply this on top to learn not just edge detectors, but object part detectors, and then eventually, the somewhat infamous Google CAT. But I think that this is actually still ongoing research. I think the most interesting research, some of the most interesting research has been on hierarchical versions of sparse coding. Sparse coding is a different algorithm that turns out to be very closely related to ICA, and you could show that they're optimizing for very similar things. So if I say sparse coding is very similar to ICA, but there are hierarchical versions of this that try to turn this into a multi-layered neural network. And it kind of works. We're able to show it can learn interesting features. But what happened was supervised learning then really took off, and the whole world shifted a lot of its attention to supervised learning and building deep supervised learning neural networks. And so the hierarchical sparse coding, running ICA over and over to learn nonlinear versions, there's probably less attention from research on that topic than it really deserves. So maybe someone in the class could go back and do more research on that. I still think it's a promising area. All right. So let me wrap up with some ICA examples. So this is actually a former TA from the class, Katie Chang. And so it turns out that ICA is routinely used to clean up EEG data today. So what's an EEG, right? Place many electrodes on your scalp to measure little electrical recordings on the surface of your scalp. So, what does human brain do, right? Human brain, your neurons in your brain right now generate little pulses of electricity. And if you place an electrode on your scalp, you can get a very weak measurement of the voltage of the electrical activity at a certain point in your scalp. So the analogy to excuse me. Oh, what's wrong? All right. So the analogy to the cocktail party problem, the overlapping speakers' voices, is that your brain does a lot of things at the same time, right? Your brain helps regulate your heartbeat. Part of your brain does that. Another part of your brain, makes your eyes blink every now and then. Another part of your brain is also responsible for making sure that you breathe. And then part of your brain is responsible for thinking about machine learning and stuff like that, right? So your brain actually handles many different tasks at the same time. And as your brain, sorry, I'm not sure what's wrong with this. Okay. And as your brain carries out these different tasks in parallel, different parts of your brain generate different electrical impulses. So think of there as, imagine that you have a cocktail party in your head, right? So many overlapping voices. So there's now voices in your head. Now it's just getting bad. But one part of your brain is saying, all right, heart, go and beat, heart, go and beat, heart, go and beat. And another part of your brain is saying, hey, breathe in and breathe out, breathe in and breathe out. Another part of your brain is, ooh, what's wrong with this PowerPoint? Right? That's what my brain's saying, right? What each electrode on the surface of your scalp does is it measures an overlapping combination of all of these voices, because different parts of your brain are sending these electrical impulses, they add up, and so any one point on the surface of your brain reflects a sum or a mixture, or really a sum of these different voices, of these different things your brain is doing. And so if you just zooming into the EEG plot, each line is a voltage measured at a single electrode, right, on, say, your scalp. And these signals are quite correlated. You see that when there's a massive voice in your brain shouting, like, right, beat your heart or blink your eyes, that signal can go to all of the different electrodes, which is why you can see these artifacts reflected in all of these electrodes. Sorry. All right. Turns out a pretty good way to clean up this data is to take all of these time series, pretty much exactly as we learned about it with the ICA algorithm, and separate out into the independent components. And so it turns out in this example, there are two components corresponding to driving the heartbeat. That's actually the eye blink component. And so one way to clean up this data, sorry, I really wonder what's wrong with this. All right, let me try something. Maybe if I, oh, that's interesting. All right. Okay, well, all right. If you, right, so there's heartbeat, there's eye blink, and, I really don't get it. All right. And if you run ICA and then remove out, have a person say, oh, that's heartbeat, that's eye blink, and subtract out those components, then you can end up with a much more cleaned up EEG signal, which you can then use for downstream processing. So actually, over the past several years, there's been a lot of research on taking an EEG reading to try to guess at a high level what you're thinking. Right? It turns out that if you train a supervised learning algorithm to try to decide, are you thinking of a noun or a verb? Are you thinking of something edible, or are you thinking of something inedible? There's been very interesting research trying to use EEG to figure out, just at a very coarse level, not quite mind reading every thought you're thinking, but can we categorize very coarse level thoughts? Like, are you thinking of a person, or are you thinking of an object? And you can actually do that to some extent using EEG readings. But cleaning up the data to get rid of the eye blink, the heartbeat artifacts is a very useful pre-processing step to get cleaner data to feed into the learning algorithm to try to figure out, try to categorize, some coarse category of what you're thinking. Okay. And then more research here. It turns out that I mentioned the Google Cat thing just now. It turns out that if you train ICA, oh, the font is messed up. If you train ICA on natural images, ICA will say that the independent components of natural images are these edges, and as in that, when you see a little image patch in the world, when you see, look somewhere in the world, look at just a tiny little piece of the image, right, like 10 pixels by 10 pixels, and if you take that data and model it as ICA, ICA will say that the world is made up of edges or made up of patches like these, and that the way you end up with images in the world is by each of these patches, independently saying, is there a vertical edge, is there a horizontal edge, or is there this type of lighter on the left, dark on the right? Is there this type of lighter on top, dark at the bottom, and so on? And it's by adding all of these voices that you get a typical image patch in the world. So there are interesting theories in neuroscience about whether this is how the human brain learns to see as well. So very, very interesting work on IC and sparse coding to try to use these mechanisms to explain how the human brain tries to explain, tries to learn to perceive images, for example. Okay. So, all right. So that's it for the algorithms of ICA. Just a final comments. I think on Monday, someone asked, do the number of speakers and number of microphones need to be equal? So it turns out that if the number of microphones is larger than the number of speakers, that's actually fine, right? If the number of microphones is larger than the number of speakers, then if you run ICA or a slightly modified version of it, you find that some of the speakers are just silent speakers. And so, if you have 10 microphones and 5 speakers, if you run this algorithm on 10 microphones, you can find that, well, maybe 5 of the sources are just silent, or there are ways to just not model those 5 sources as well, right? If you think that they're just some sources of silence. So a slightly modified version of this works quite well if the number of speakers is larger than the number of microphones. If the number of microphones is larger than the number of speakers, this works quite well. If the number of microphones is smaller than the number of speakers, then that's still very much a cutting-edge research problem. So for example, if you have 2 speakers and 1 microphone, it turns out that if you have 1 male and 1 female speaker, so one relatively high pitch and one much lower pitch, then you can sometimes have some algorithms that separate out 2 voices with 1 microphone. But it doesn't work that reliably, it's a little bit finicky, but there have been research papers published showing that you could make a reasonable attempt at separating out 2 voices with 1 microphone, and the pitches are quite different, such as this 1 male, 1 female voice. But separating out 2 male voices or 2 female voices is still very hard, and there's ongoing research in those settings. Right? So that's ICA, and I guess you get to play more of it in your homework problem as well. Okay. Any last questions about ICA? Oh, sorry, say that again?
You asked comment. You said that ICA could not work as well if you have 1 microphone and 2 people talking. I guess practice-wise, that harder. Would it be fair to say if you were to introduce to that scenario an extra microphone, then the thing would done like that would work okay?
Wait, sorry, would it be fair to say?
So I guess I'm wondering, why is it a hard problem that if you only have 1 microphone with people talking, you can disambiguate them? Whereas if you just introduce an extra microphone to that scenario,
Oh. Yeah, so I think actually if you go through a lot of the math, it just breaks down, I think. Because you can have 2 independent sources, but W is now no longer a square matrix, right? It would be a, what is it? Right, so is that X is equal to AS, right? And so if X is a real number and S was 2-dimensional, so I guess this would be A would be 2 by 1, S would be A would be 2 by 1, S would be 2. Excuse me, A would be 1 by 2, and S would be a 2 by 1, and this is 1 by 1. Then A inverse kind of doesn't exist, right? So you need to come up with a way to form the maximum likelihood model, and when you have 1 microphone, it's just how do you separate out 2 overlapping voices, right? Does that make sense? So it takes much higher level knowledge, to separate out 2 voices. Does this make sense? Go ahead.
Like practically in the example you had with the
Oh, I see. Right. Let's see. So right. So if you don't know how many speakers there are, you have all these microphones, right? You have all the number of electrodes you have is fixed, so that's just your data set. And it turns out that if you run ICA with a large number of speakers, you find that many speakers are silent. There are also some versions of ICA that you. So if you think that there are, let's see. Boy, don't spend too much time on this. But it turns out that if you think that there is a relatively small number of speakers, then you don't need to explicitly model all the speakers. Instead, what you would model, so again, to pose this a maximum likelihood estimation problem, let's say that X is an R10, right? So you have 10 recordings, but you suspect that you only have 5 speakers. Then in this case, I guess the matrix A would be, what is it? It'd be 10 by 5, is it? Right? To mix the 5 sources into 10 speakers. And you could formulate a maximum likelihood estimation problem assuming the existence of only 5 speakers without modeling a lot of speakers and then finding later that they're all silent. Does that make sense? So if you formulate, if you parameterize a model like this using A instead of W, then you can formulate a maximum likelihood estimation problem where you just assume that there are 5 speakers and S is generated by 5 speakers mixing through a linear thing plus noise.
But I guess like if you don't know how many speakers you have or even what order of speakers you have beforehand, how do you know that you have like enough microphones?
Oh, I see, sure. Right, how do you know how do you know how many speakers you have? So I think it's one of those things a little bit like K-means, I guess, where you try it and see what works. And if you find that the first few speakers will capture most of the variance, if you find that the additional speakers are quite silent and they're quite small, then you could just cut off at that time. I don't want to go too much into the different numbers of speakers and microphones, IC algorithms. Yeah, but let me just take a couple last questions and move on. Good question? Yeah. Say it again? Is it? Oh, do you ever assume a prior on W? I'm sure you can. It's not usually done in this version of the algorithm, but I would not be surprised if there are some other versions where you do. I've not seen that a lot myself, actually. Yeah. Right. Cool. All right, cool. Let's see. All right, good. We're half an hour. Okay, good. So sorry, I'm just not sure. All right, actually, yeah, let's do it later. All right. All right. So that wraps up our chapter on unsupervised learning, right? So we learned about, I guess, K-means clustering, the EM algorithm for mixture of Gaussians, or really mixture of Gaussians model, a factor analysis model, and also PCA, and then, today the ICA independent components analysis algorithm. And all of these were algorithms that could take as input an unlabeled training set, just the XIs and no labels, and would find various interesting structures in the data, such as clusters or subspaces, or in the case of ICA, the voices of the independent speakers. And you implement ICA and play with it yourself in the homework problem, where you get to separate out many 5 overlapping voices. The last of the 4 major topics I want to cover in this class. We talk about supervised learning, kind of advanced machine learning, unsupervised learning, and the 4th and the final major topics we cover in this class will be reinforcement learning. Right. So To motivate reinforcement learning, let's say you want to have a computer learn to fly a helicopter, right? I think I showed some of the videos in the first lecture, so I'll just skip that here. But it turns out that if you are at every point in time given the position of a helicopter, called the state of a helicopter, and you're asked to take an action on how to move the control sticks, to make the helicopter fly in a certain trajectory. It turns out that it's very difficult to know what's the one right answer for how to move the control sticks of a helicopter, right? So if you don't have a mapping from X to Y because you can't quite specify the one true way to fly a helicopter, it's hard to use supervised learning for that, right? And what reinforcement learning does is an algorithm that doesn't ask you to tell it the right answer at every step. It doesn't ask you to tell it exactly what's the one true way to move the controls of a helicopter at any moment in time. Instead, your responsibility as a designer, a machine learning engineer, or AI engineer is to specify a reward function that just tells the helicopter when it's flying well and when it's flying poorly. So your job as a designer is to write a cost function or reward function that gives the helicopter a high reward whenever it's doing well, flying accurately, flying trajectory you want to, and gives the helicopter a large negative reward whenever it crashes or does something bad, right? And I think think of it as like training a dog, right? When you say good dog, when you say bad dog, and the dog figures out when to do more of the good dog things. And your job is not to tell the dog, well, you can't actually talk to the dog and tell it what to do, I guess that doesn't work. But you can tell it good dog and bad dog, and hopefully it learns from those positive and negative rewards how to do more of the good things. Okay? Another example, let's say you want to write a program to play chess, or I guess most, somewhat famously and arguably somewhat slightly overhyped Go, or AlphaGo, right? So it's very difficult to know given a certain chessboard position or checkers or Go board position, what is the one true move? What's the one best move? So it's very difficult to formulate, playing chess as a supervised learning problem. And instead, the mechanisms used to play chess are much more like reinforcement learning, where you can let your program play chess or Go or whatever, and whenever it wins, you go, oh, good computer, and when it loses, you go, oh, bad computer. So that's a reward function, and the learning algorithm's job is to figure out by itself how to get more of the positive rewards, right? And actually, common rewards for learning to play chess or checkers or Othello or Go is reward of +1 for win, -1 for lose, and 0 for a tie. Right? So write your chess playing program, this will be a common choice reward, where R is the reward function and S is the state. Okay? And I will go into the notation in a little bit. And so as you can imagine, giving only this type of information to, say, a chess playing program, it places much more burden on the program to figure out what to do. Right? In fact, one of the challenges of reinforcement learning is, so this is called a reward, and that's called the state. And the state means the status of the chessboard, where are the pieces on the chessboard, or the status of the helicopter, where exactly is the helicopter, and are you the right side up or are you upside down, and where are you, right? And it turns out one of the challenges, one of the things that makes reinforcement learning hard is the credit assignment problem. And that means that if your program is playing a game of chess, and let's say it loses on move 50, so it plays a game, and then on move 50, right, it's checkmated, it loses his opponent. So it gets a reward of -1. But how can the program actually figure out what it did well and what it did poorly? Right? If you lose a game in move 50, it might be that the program made a really bad move, made a blunder in move 20, and then, but it just took another 30 moves before his fate was sealed, right? So in a game of chess, you make a bad mistake early on, it can still take many, many moves in the game of chess before the final outcome of losing, or winning or losing is reached. And actually another, it turns out that if you are trying to build a self-driving car, if ever a car crashes, right? Chances are the thing the car was doing right before it crashes was brake, but it's not braking that causes the crash. It's probably something else the car did many, many seconds ago that led to the bad outcome. So if there's a bad outcome, how does the algorithm know, of all the things it did before, how does it know what it did well, which it should do more of, and what it did poorly, which it should do less of? And conversely, if there's a good outcome, like it wins a game of chess, well, how do you know what you did well, right? So that's called the credit assignment problem, which is when your algorithm gets some reward, how do you actually figure out what you did well and what you did poorly so you know what to do more of and what to do less of, right? So as we develop reinforcement learning algorithms, we'll see that the algorithms we use have to at least indirectly try to solve the credit assignment problem. Okay. So reinforcement learning problems like playing chess or flying helicopters or building these various robots is modeled using the MDP, or the Markov decision process formalism. And this is a way, this is a notation and a formalism for modeling how the world works, and then reinforcement learning algorithms will solve problems using this formalism. So what is an MDP? So an MDP is a 5-tuple and let me explain what each of these are. So S is a set of states. So for example, in chess, this would be the set of all possible chess positions, or in flying a helicopter, this would be the set of all the possible positions and orientations and velocities of your helicopter. Right? A is a set of actions where in the helicopter, this would be all the positions you could move your control sticks, or in chess, this would be all the moves you could make, in a game of chess. P subscript SA is a state transition probabilities. And so we'll see later, these state transition probabilities tell you if you take a certain action A and a certain state S, what's the chance of you ending up at a particular different state S prime, right? Gamma is a discount factor, it's a number between 0 and 1. Don't worry about this for now. We'll come back to this in a minute. And R is that all-important reward function. Okay? So in order to develop a reinforcement learning algorithm, I'm going to use as a running example a simplified MDP that we can draw on a whiteboard, right? So helicopters and chess and Go and so on are really complicated MDPs. So just to illustrate the algorithms, I'm going to use a simpler MDP. And this is an example drawn from the textbook Russell and Norvig. But I'm going to use a simplified MDP in which you have a robot navigating this simple maze, and there's an obstacle. So this is a grid world, right? So your robot, I don't know, well, R2D2 like robot, I guess, right? And it's navigating this very simple maze, and this is a pillar or this is a wall, so you can't walk into that wall. And let me just use indexing on the states as follows. So this MDP, let's go through the 5-tuple and talk about what each of the 5 things are. So this MDP has 11 states corresponding to the 11 possible positions that the robot could be in, right? Each of these blank squares, so the 11 possible states. And the actions are north, south, east, and west, right? You can command your robot to move in any of these directions. And I don't know, if you worked on robots before, you know that when you command a robot to head straight, it doesn't always go exactly straight. Sometimes the wheels slip, it veers off at a slight angle. And so in this simplified example, we're going to model it as that if you command the robot to go north from a certain state, that there's a 0.8% chance it'll successfully go where you told it to, and a 0.1 chance that it'll accidentally veer off to the left or accidentally veer off to the right. Okay? If you're working on real robots, right, working on a lot of robots, it is actually important to model the noisy dynamics of a robot wheel slipping slightly, orientation being slightly off. Now, in a real robot, you'd have a much bigger state space than 11 states, right? So this is simplified. So this is not a realistic model for how robots actually slip, but because we're using such a small state space, I think just for illustration purposes, we'll use this. And so, for example, the state transition probabilities to specify these. You say that if you're in the state 3, 1, so this state 3, 1, and you command it to go north, that the chance of getting to the state 3, 2 is 0.8. And the chance of getting to the state 4, 1 is 0.1. Chance of getting to 2, 1 is 0.1. And the chance of getting to other states is like 3, 3, and other states is equal to 0. Okay? So the state transition probabilities would capture that if you're here instead to go north, there's a 0.8 chance of getting here, 0.1 chance of getting here, 0.1 chance of getting here, and like a 0.0 chance of hopping 2 steps. Okay? Yeah, right. Oh, and again, in this simplified MDP example, we'll just assume that if the robot, hits a wall, it just bounces off the wall and stays where it is. So if you tell this to go east, it slips south, or just bounce off the wall and stay exactly where it is. Now, let's specify the reward function. We'll come back to the discount factor later. But let's say you want the robot to navigate to this cell in the upper right-hand corner. And so to incentivize the robot to get to this square, that's the prize, or that's the goal in the maze, let's put a +1 reward there. And let's say you really don't want the robot to go to this cell, then you could put a -1 reward there, right? So the way you specify the task for a robot to do is in designing the reward function. So in our example, well, let me just copy that again. +1 -1. Right. We have that the reward at the cell 4, 3 is +1, and the reward at the cell 4, 2 is -1. And then, if you want the robot to get to the +1 reward cell as quickly as possible, then again, there are many ways of designing reward functions. But one common choice would be to put a negative penalty, a very small negative penalty. Right, such as set the reward to -0.02 for all other states. And the effect of a small negative reward like this is to charge it, right, every every step it is just loitering around. So charge it a little bit for using up electricity and wandering around, because this incentivizes the robot to hurry up and get to the +1 reward. Right? So if you give a small penalty, for loitering and wasting electricity, say. So this is how an MDP works. Your robot wakes up at some state S0, at time 0. So you turn on the robot, and the robot says, oh, I'm at this state. And based on what state it is in, it will get to choose some action, A0. So decide, do I want to go north, south, east, or west? So choose some action. Based on the action, the consequence of the choice is it will get to some state S1, the state at the next time step, which is distributed according to the state transition probabilities governed by the previous state and the action it chose. Right? So depending on what action it chose, it has different chances of moving north, south, east, or west. Now that it's in S1, it then has to choose a new action, A1. And as a consequence of the action A1, it will get to some new state S2, which is governed by the state transition probabilities, S1, A1, and so on. Okay? And the robot just keeps on running. Okay? And so the robots will go through a sequence of states, S0, S1, S2, and so on, depending on the choices it receives, depending on the actions it chooses. And the total payoff is written as follows, with one more detail. Is that term gamma. So think of gamma as a number like 0.99. So gamma is usually chosen to be just slightly less than 1. And so the total payoff is the sum of rewards, or more technically is the sum of discounted rewards. And what this does is it adds up all the rewards that the robot receives over time. But the further reward is into the future, the smaller the gamma to the power of time that reward is multiplied by. Okay, so any reward you get at time 1, you get all of that. A reward you get at time 2 is multiplied by 0.99. A reward you get at the next step is multiplied by 0.99 squared, 0.99 cubed, and so on. And so what the discount factor does is it has the effect of giving a smaller weight to rewards in the distant future. And this means that this encourages the robot to also get the positive rewards faster, or postpone the negative rewards, right? And so in financial applications, the discount factor has a natural interpretation as the time value of money, because if you have $1 today, you're better off having $1 today than having a dollar a year from now, right? Because you can put the dollar in the bank and earn interest for a year on your dollar, and so $1 today is strictly better than $1 in the future. And conversely, having to pay $100 or having to pay $1 a year from now is also better than having to pay $1 today, right? Because if you could, save your money and earn interest and then issue a payment to someone else a year from now rather than now, then you're actually slightly wealthier. And so gamma in financial applications has an interpretation as the time value of money, or as the interest rate, I guess. But more generally, even for non-financial applications, there are some financial applications of reinforcement learning, but lots of non-financial applications as well. This mechanism of using a discount factor has the effect of encouraging the system to get to the positive rewards as quickly as possible, but then also conversely to try to push the negative rewards as far into the future as possible, right? And I think to be pragmatic, there are two reasons why people use gamma. The story I just told, time value of money, front load positive rewards, postpone negative rewards, that's the story you tend to hear people say in terms of why we have a discount factor. The other reason we have a discount factor is actually a much more pragmatic one, which is that a lot of the reinforcement learning algorithms you see, they converge much faster or they work much better if you're willing to have a discount factor. Right? So it turns out that if gamma is equal to 1, or if gamma is not strictly less than 1, it's much harder, or there are many reinforcement learning algorithms that may not converge, or it's much harder to prove the convergence or may not converge. So just as a pragmatic thing, this makes the job much easier for your algorithms. Now I see some of you shaking your heads in disapproval. All right. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so one of the things if there's no gamma is that the reward, some of the rewards, can increase or decrease without bounds. So by having gamma, this guarantees that the total payoff is a finite value, or is a bounded value. So that's one of the parts that go into some of the proofs or some of the reasonings behind why reinforcement learning algorithms converge. Yeah. So, cool, thank you. That's good insight. Okay. So the goal of reinforcement learning is to choose actions over time to maximize the expected total payoff. Okay. And in particular, what most reinforcement learning algorithms will come up with is a policy that maps from states to actions, right? So the output of most reinforcement learning algorithms will be a policy or a controller. In the RL world, we tend to use the term policy, but policy just means controller that maps from state to action. So it turns out that for the MDP that we have, right, it turns out that this is the optimal policy. So for example, if you take this example, this cell here, right, this cell over here, this policy is saying pi applied to the state 3, 1 is equal to west, right? And that, so, excuse me. So it separately worked out what is the optimal policy, and this turns out to be optimal policy in the sense that if you, we say execute this policy, so to execute the policy means that whenever you're in the state S, take the action given by pi of S, right? So that's what it means to execute a certain policy. And it turns out that this policy, well, I worked out separately, right, offline, on my laptop, that this is the optimal policy for this MDP. And it turns out that if you execute this policy, meaning whenever you're in a certain state, take the action indicated by the arrow, that this is the policy that will maximize the expected total payoff. Okay? And the problem in reinforcement learning is, given a definition for an MDP, or given a problem, to pose the problem as an MDP, figure out what's the set of states, what's the set of actions, what are the state transition probabilities, specify a discount factor, and specify a reward function. And then to have a reinforcement learning algorithm, find the policy pi that maximizes the expected payoff. And then when you want your robot to act, or when you want your chess playing program to act, whenever you're in some state S, take the action given by pi of S. And hopefully this will result in a robot that efficiently navigates to the plus 1 state. Okay? So it turns out that MDPs are quite good at making fine distinctions. So one example, it's actually not totally obvious whether here you're better off going north or going west, right? And it turns out that there is a trade-off. If you go west here, then you're going to take a longer route to get to the plus 1, so you take longer. The plus 1 is discounted more heavily. You're taking these penalties along the way. Excuse me. But on the flip side, if you were to try to go north, you could try to get there faster, but on this step, there's a 0.1% chance that you accidentally slip off to the minus 1 state. So what is the optimal action, right? It's actually quite hard to just look at it with your eyes and make a decision, but it turns out that if you solve for the optimal set of actions in this MDP, in this example, it's actually to take a longer and safer route. Next question?
Does this optimization goal always avoid like cycles in policy?
Does this avoid cycles and policies? So if the optimal set of actions is the cycle around, then it should find that. I mean, for example, if there are only penalties everywhere, and you just go and run in a circle, then the algorithm will actually choose to do that. But in this case, you want to get to the plus 1 as quickly as possible. Right? And so what we'll see, all right, that's one question. Go ahead.
If you're running against a certain chess game and the opponent places something, then do you update your policy function by changing the probability of taking the next step, or do you change the reward function that you assign to each of the different states?
Wait, so, all right, so sorry. So chessing, checkers and Go and so on, there are one complication is you take a move. So actually, all right, to refine the description of chess, what happens in playing chess is the state is your board, right? So it's your move. So you see a board, that's the state. And so you make a move, and then the opponent makes a move, and then that's the new state. So the state is when you and your opponent both take turns, then it's back to you, right? And because you don't know exactly what your opponent will do, there is a priority distribution over if I make a move, well, what's the other person going to do? Miss, one last question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the probabilities that you assign to your move, is that something that's linear, or is that something that we assign to another algorithm?
Yeah, right. Oh, the priorities I assign per node, the 0.8, 0.1, 0.1, where does that come from? So we'll talk about that later. In some applications, this is learned. So if you build a robot, you might not know, is it 0.8, 0.1, 0.1, or 0.7, 0.15, 0.15. So it's quite common to use data to learn those state transition probabilities as well. We'll see a specific example of that later. Okay. So all right. So where we are, just to summarize, this is how you formulate a problem as an MDP, and then the job of reinforcement learning algorithm is really to go from the MDP to telling you what is a good policy. Okay, so let's break, and then have a good Thanksgiving, everyone. Won't see you for like a week and a half. Enjoy yourselves, and we'll reconvene after Thanksgiving with this.